Well, hello and welcome to New Hope for Today. My name is Pastor Andrew Heiss, and I'm the pastor at New Hope Friends Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. As I was thinking about this month has been known as Black History Month, and when we think of Black history specifically in America, specifically in the United States, we cannot separate Black history from a history of slavery, an unjust, awful, heinous sin, a systemic sin within our culture that is really a blot on our history in America. If we think back to a time when Black people were subjugated to, especially in the South, to those plantation owners, and were treated in all kinds of cruel ways, I become so indignant, so angry over this idea not because of the institution, not because people have been enslaving people for millennia. This since the beginning of time, people have tried to gain the upper hand on others. But I so feel it was such a heinous thing because many churches said slavery was okay, didn't see anything wrong with it. In fact, the practice of slavery and then the practice of Jim Crow, the practice of segregation, the practice of all these things were propagated and propped up many times by the church. It's an injustice. And when I read stories of slavery, it just breaks my heart. I was reading even today a story of slavery. It's a slave who escaped his owners and went into the woods, escaping, trying to get out of this just cycle of injustice, the yoke, the pressure of slavery. He gets into the woods, but is sniffed out by bloodhounds. And once his master brings him back, this is what he says happens to him. He said, "I was severely punished by a board cut full of holes to raise the blisters. Then I was whipped with a strap to burst the blisters, which were then salted and peppered. This hurt me and burned me very badly." Needless to say, this is just needless violence against another human being who was made in the image of God. And this is nothing short of a sinful act. Slavery is sin. There's really no getting around that. But the thing that really intrigued me about this story is what the slave who, Thomas Brown was his name, who suffered this punishment for escaping. He said this, "I never tried to run away again." He was trapped in this unjust, sinful, heinous situation, and there was no escape for him. He tried to escape on his own, but it just seemed like his master could always come and find him again. The scriptures talk to us about our own sinfulness, our own shortcomings, our own hearts as being slaves to sin. That we are in an inescapable cycle of having sin rule over us, trying to seek out pleasures, trying to, as I said even on Tuesday, avoid pain. It's a never-ending cycle, and in many ways we are slaves to this cycle. And I think the scriptures get this right. I think we can look around and think about our phones, how we're slaves to trying to find pleasure, trying to find some kind of meaning in our lives. We're slaves to this. But here's the good news and the awesome thing about Christianity. Christianity calls us out of this bondage. You see, when Christ came, he took on the slavery on himself. He took on the bondage himself and died so that he could set us free, so that he could buy our freedom. And this is what Paul says when it comes to this freedom that we have in Christ. He says, "For the sake of freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery." Now imagine this man who was unjustly beaten Thomas Brown, who had tried for years and years and years to escape this awful situation where he was a slave. But he only was met with more beating, more emptiness, more yoke, more bondage, until finally one day somebody came along and said, I'm buying you back. I'm buying you out from this master. And of course, probably initially you would think, oh my goodness, he would think, oh my goodness, another slave owner. I'm just going from person to person. But then what if that person looked at him and said, look, I paid the price for your freedom, and I'm going to let you go free. I've paid your price. You can go free. What would that man feel? He would feel a sense of freedom, a sense of wanting to just escape, to do all the things he wanted to do in his life, to make something of himself. But imagine that this man, after being set free by this other man, if Thomas Brown were to go back and say, you know what? I think I'm just going to submit myself back to your ownership, your beating, all the things that you had done before. This would be insane. I mean, Thomas Brown would be probably committed. It's crazy to think that. Well, what Paul is saying here in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, is that Christ has set us free. He is that man who would have come into this situation and bought us back. And he said, instead of giving us some more bondage, he said, look, I'm setting you truly free. So stand firm. But then he warns us. He warns us, don't submit again to the yoke of slavery. Today, I know some of us are going back to the pleasures that we think we can find in sin, but all we're going to find there is more bondage, more slavery. The yoke of slavery. Listen, today, Christ has set you free. You don't have to find your identity anymore in your sin. You don't have to find your identity anymore in anything other than Christ. And I hope that today you will not go back to submit yourself again to this slavery, but you would truly live in the freedom you have in Jesus Christ. Blessings to you all, and I hope I'll talk to you next week. New Hope for Today is a video devotional released on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is recorded by Pastor Andrew Heiss of New Hope Friends Church. New Hope Friends Church is located in Goldsboro, North Carolina at 4451 U.S. Highway 70 East. New Hope for Today. Strength for today, hope for tomorrow.